Picture this, you're a truck driver pulling into a rest stop in rural Wyoming after a brutal 18-hour haul. It's midnight, you're exhausted, and all you want is a quick bathroom break before catching a few hours of sleep in your cab. As you step out into the cold mountain air, you notice something moving in the shadows near the dumpsters. A dog emerges, not a stray looking for food, but a German shepherd so emaciated you can count every rib, with paws bleeding and worn to the point where bone is visible through shredded pads. But the most striking thing about this dog isn't his terrible condition, it's his eyes. There's a determination in them you've never seen in an animal before, a purpose that seems almost human. He doesn't beg for food or attention, he drinks from a puddle, glances in what you'll later realize is an eastward direction, and continues walking with a limp so severe it looks like torture. You have no idea you're watching a dog in the middle of a 2,000-mile journey to find the owner who lost him. This is the extraordinary true story of Max, a German shepherd who became separated from his owner in California and walked across 6 states, through deserts, over mountains, and across territories that should have killed him, to find his way home to Virginia. His journey took 14 months, covered terrain that seasoned hikers wouldn't attempt without extensive planning, and demonstrated a navigational ability and determination that scientists still can't fully explain. Max didn't just survive an impossible journey, he overcame obstacles that would have stopped most humans while maintaining a course toward a destination over 2,000 miles away that he had only visited once. But how does a dog navigate across a continent using landmarks he's never seen, through territories he's never traveled, toward a home that was thousands of miles from where he was lost? How does an animal maintain not just physical survival but mental determination through more than a year of solitary travel? And what does Max's journey reveal about the bonds between humans and dogs, and about capabilities that science is only beginning to understand? The answer lies in understanding that sometimes love creates motivation powerful enough to overcome what should be impossible. Max's story begins not with his incredible journey, but with an ordinary life that created the extraordinary bond that would later drive him across a continent. He came into the life of Sarah Chen, a U.S. Army veteran, during one of her darkest periods, shortly after her return from deployment in Afghanistan, where she had served as a medic. Sarah's transition from military to civilian life had been difficult. She struggled with PTSD, had nightmares about casualties she couldn't save, and found civilian society jarring after years in combat zones. She isolated herself in her small apartment in Norfolk, Virginia, avoiding social situations that triggered anxiety and spending days in depression that made basic functioning difficult. "I was barely surviving," Sarah recalls. "I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't maintain relationships, couldn't see any future that made sense. The VA was trying to help, but therapy and medications only did so much. I was seriously considering whether life was worth continuing." The intervention that changed Sarah's trajectory came through a VA program that trained service dogs for veterans with PTSD. Max, then an 18-month-old German shepherd, had been specifically trained to help veterans manage anxiety, interrupt nightmares, and provide the kind of constant non-judgmental companionship that helped many veterans rebuild their lives. Max arrived and immediately everything changed. Sarah explains, "He sensed when I was having panic attacks before I fully realized it myself. He would wake me from nightmares by licking my face. Most importantly, he gave me a reason to get up every morning, someone who depended on me, who needed walks and food and attention. Taking care of Max forced me to take care of myself." The bond between Sarah and Max deepened rapidly. Within months, Max had become more than a service dog. He was Sarah's constant companion, her primary emotional support, and the relationship that gave her life structure and meaning. She took him everywhere that regulations allowed, and he became a familiar presence among friends and family, who recognized that Max wasn't just a pet but an essential part of Sarah's mental health management. People who haven't experienced that kind of bond might think it's excessive, but Max quite literally saved my life, Sarah reflects. "He gave me purpose when I had none, stability when everything felt chaotic, and unconditional love when I couldn't love myself." For 2 years, Sarah and Max were inseparable. Sarah's mental health improved dramatically, allowing her to maintain employment as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company. Her social life expanded as Max provided both emotional support and a conversation starter that made interactions easier. The future that had seemed impossibly dark during her worst periods now included plans, goals, and reasons to keep moving forward. The incident that would separate Max from Sarah and trigger his incredible journey happened in 2018, during what should have been a routine cross-country road trip. Sarah had accepted a temporary assignment with her company that required relocating to Los Angeles for 6 months. Rather than flying and boarding Max, she decided to drive across country, treating it as an adventure that she and Max could share. The trip went smoothly until they reached a rest stop near Barstow, California, about 120 miles from their Los Angeles destination. Sarah pulled in for a bathroom break, and to let Max stretch his legs after hours in the car, she attached his leash and walked him to a grassy area where several other travelers were exercising their dogs. What happened next would haunt Sarah for years. Max, typically calm and obedient, suddenly reacted to something, another dog, a sudden noise, or perhaps nothing that Sarah could identify, and pulled the leash from her hand before she could react. He bolted across the rest area and into the desert terrain beyond before Sarah could catch him. It happened in seconds, Sarah remembers. One moment he was beside me, the next he was gone. I screamed his name, chased after him, but he was running full speed, and I had no chance of catching him. Sarah immediately organized a search, enlisting other travelers, calling local animal control, and posting about Max on lost pet social media groups. She spent 3 days in the area putting up flyers, walking the surrounding desert calling his name, and following up on every reported sighting. But the California desert is vast and unforgiving. Max had disappeared into terrain where temperatures reached 110 degrees during the day, where water was scarce, and where coyotes, rattlesnakes, and other dangers could easily kill a domestic dog unused to survival in extreme conditions. After 5 days with no confirmed sightings, Sarah was forced to make an agonizing decision. Her temporary work assignment was beginning, and she couldn't indefinitely delay her arrival. With devastating reluctance, she drove to Los Angeles, leaving flyers throughout the Barstow area, and instructions with animal control to contact her if Max was found. Leaving that area without Max was the hardest thing I've ever done, Sarah says. It felt like abandoning him even though I had no choice. I kept thinking about him alone in the desert, confused about why I wasn't coming for him. The guilt was overwhelming. Sarah's 6 months in Los Angeles were torture. She couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep without nightmares about Max suffering alone in the wilderness. She maintained constant contact with California animal rescues and shelters, checked lost pet websites obsessively, and drove back to the Barstow area 3 times hoping to find new leads. But as weeks became months with no confirmed sightings, Sarah was forced to accept what everyone around her had been gently suggesting, that Max had likely died in the desert, victim of heat, dehydration, wildlife, or any of the countless dangers that made the California desert deadly for unprepared animals. What Sarah didn't know was that Max was very much alive, and he was walking. Wildlife cameras and occasional sightings would later allow researchers to piece together the early stages of Max's journey, though many details remain speculation based on the evidence he left behind. Max had apparently survived his first days in the desert by locating water sources, small springs and cattle troughs that allowed him to avoid fatal dehydration. His service dog training, which included extensive conditioning to remain calm in stressful situations, may have prevented the panic that causes many lost dogs to run aimlessly until they collapse from exhaustion. But most remarkably, Max appeared to have made a decision that would define the next 14 months of his life. He was going home. Not to the rest stop where he'd been separated from Sarah, not to Los Angeles where Sarah had gone, home to Virginia, the place where he and Sarah had spent 2 years together, and which represented the only stable home he had known. The navigational ability this required is honestly staggering, explains Dr. Michael Rodriguez, an animal behaviorist who later studied Max's journey. Max had driven from Virginia to California once, spending most of that trip inside a car where he couldn't see landmarks or develop a mental map of the route. Yet somehow he managed to maintain an eastern bearing that, over 14 months and 2,000 miles, brought him back to within 5 miles of his actual home. The mechanisms that allow dogs to navigate long distances remain incompletely understood by science. Current theories suggest combinations of magnetic field sensing, landmark memory, scent trail following, and even subtle environmental cues that humans can't perceive. But none of these fully explain how Max could navigate toward a destination over 2,000 miles away across terrain he'd never seen before. Max's journey took him from the California desert across Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and finally into Virginia, a route that roughly followed Interstate 70 and then I-64, suggesting he may have been following highways or railway lines as reliable corridors that provided access to water, food sources, and relatively safe passage. Evidence of Max's travels came from scattered reports that weren't connected until much later. A German shepherd spotted drinking from an irrigation canal in rural Nevada, a dog matching his description seen near a highway rest stop in Utah, reports of a limping dog following railway lines in Colorado. Each sighting suggested a dog that was traveling with purpose, rather than wandering randomly, Dr. Rodriguez explains. Witnesses described behavior that was goal-oriented. The dog would stop briefly for water or food, then continue in a consistent direction. This wasn't a lost dog hoping to be found. This was a dog actively traveling toward a specific destination. Max's survival through this journey required overcoming obstacles that would challenge even humans. He crossed the scorching Nevada desert where daytime temperatures exceeded 115 degrees. He navigated the Rocky Mountains through passes over 10,000 feet elevation. He avoided highways busy enough to be deadly for animals, but followed routes that provided access to human infrastructure and resources. Most remarkably, Max survived winter in the Midwest, where temperatures dropped below zero and snowfall could exceed several feet. Wildlife cameras in Missouri captured images of a German shepherd matching Max's description, hunting small animals and scavenging from dumpsters, skills he would have had to learn through trial and error since service dogs aren't trained for survival hunting. Max essentially taught himself to survive in the wild, Dr. Rodriguez observes. He learned to hunt, to avoid dangerous predators, to find shelter in extreme weather, and to navigate human areas for resources without getting caught or injured. These are sophisticated survival skills that wild canines spend months learning from pack members. Max developed them alone through desperate necessity. The physical toll of this journey was severe. Later examination would reveal that Max lost nearly 40% of his body weight, suffered permanent damage to his paw pads, developed arthritis in his hips and shoulders from constant walking, and had multiple healed fractures that he had somehow survived and recovered from without veterinary intervention. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Max's journey was the mental determination required to maintain it. Most lost dogs, once separated from owners, either remain in the area hoping to be found, or eventually integrate into feral dog populations, or find new human caretakers. Max did neither. He maintained his course toward home through more than a year of hardship that would have broken most humans. The psychological resilience this required is almost incomprehensible, explains Dr. Sarah Thompson, an animal cognition researcher. Max was experiencing constant physical pain, recurring hunger and thirst, exposure to extreme weather, and complete social isolation from both humans and other dogs. Yet he maintained focus on a goal that was months away with no guarantee of success. That level of determination suggests emotional bonds and cognitive capabilities we're only beginning to understand. Max's journey ended on a cold November evening in 2019, 14 months after his initial disappearance. Sarah had returned to Virginia after completing her Los Angeles assignment, and though she maintained hope that Max might somehow still be alive, she had largely accepted that she would never see him again. She was at home when she heard scratching at her front door, a sound that immediately triggered memories of Max requesting to be let in from the backyard. Sarah opened the door expecting nothing, perhaps a neighborhood cat or debris blown by wind. What she saw instead was something she initially couldn't process. A German shepherd stood on her porch, painfully thin, obviously injured, covered in mud and matted fur. For several seconds Sarah didn't recognize him. The dog looked ancient, broken, nothing like the healthy, confident Max she remembered. Then the dog made a sound, a specific whine that Max had always used when greeting Sarah after separations, and everything clicked into place. I just collapsed, Sarah remembers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't possible. Max was dead, or lost forever in California. There was no way he could be standing on my porch in Virginia, but it was him. I knew it was him. Sarah rushed Max to an emergency veterinary hospital, where the full extent of his ordeal became clear. He was severely malnourished, dehydrated and covered in wounds at various stages of healing. His paw pads were worn down to underlying tissue. He had multiple broken teeth from eating bones and hard materials. X-rays revealed healed fractures and developing arthritis. But most remarkably, Max was alive. Against every probability, he had survived a journey that should have killed him dozens of times over. The veterinary team's initial prognosis was cautious. Max's physical condition was so poor that survival wasn't guaranteed even with intensive care, but Max had overcome worse odds before, and his recovery, while slow, was steady. Max's will to survive was extraordinary, recalls Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the veterinarian who supervised his recovery. Dogs in his condition often give up, but Max fought through every setback. It was like he had already decided he wasn't going to die, not after coming this far. Max's recovery took months of specialized care including nutritional rehabilitation, wound treatment, pain management, and physical therapy for his joint damage. Sarah devoted herself completely to his care, taking leave from work to provide the constant attention that Max's condition required. As Max's physical condition improved, the emotional reunion deepened. Max's behavior towards Sarah showed unmistakable recognition and relief. The anxious vigilance that had characterized his survival journey was replaced by the contentment of being home with his person. Max would follow me everywhere, even just from room to room, Sarah explains. It was like he couldn't believe we were actually together again and was afraid I would disappear if he let me out of his sight. The story of Max's incredible journey spread through social media, news coverage, and eventually scientific literature. As researchers recognized the extraordinary nature of his navigation and survival, Max became the subject of academic papers studying canine cognition, navigation, and the human-animal bond. Dr. Rodriguez's research team attempted to reconstruct Max's route through sighting reports, wildlife camera captures, and physical evidence. While the complete path remained speculative, the evidence suggested Max had maintained a remarkably consistent eastern bearing over terrain that varied from desert to mountains to plains. Max's navigation was more accurate than would be expected from random wandering or simple compass following, Dr. Rodriguez explains. He made course corrections that suggested he was somehow aware of his geographical position relative to his destination. This requires cognitive mapping abilities that we're only beginning to understand in animals. The research inspired by Max's case has contributed to evolving scientific understanding of canine cognition and the human-animal bond. His journey provided evidence for theories suggesting that dogs possess more sophisticated navigation abilities, longer-term memory, and greater emotional complexity than previously recognized. Max's journey demonstrates that the bonds between humans and dogs create motivation powerful enough to override survival instincts, Dr. Thompson explains. Most animals prioritize immediate survival, finding food, water, shelter. Max subordinated immediate needs to long-term goals, enduring ongoing hardship in pursuit of reunion with his person. That requires a level of emotional attachment and future planning that challenges our understanding of animal cognition. Today Max lives quietly with Sarah in Virginia, his traveling days over. He's now 7 years old, with the physical limitations that his incredible journey created. Arthritis makes walking difficult, his damaged paws require constant care, and he has developed anxiety about car travel that Sarah respects by rarely driving with him. But Max seems content in ways that suggest he knows he's home. He spends his days beside Sarah, maintaining the protective vigilance that characterized his service dog training, but now directed towards simply ensuring his person stays safe and nearby. Max gave me my life back once when I needed him most, Sarah reflects. Then he literally walked across the country to find his way back to me when we were separated. I'll spend the rest of his life making sure he knows he's loved, safe, and home. Max's story has inspired countless people facing their own separations and challenges. His journey has become a symbol of determination, loyalty, and the power of love to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. But perhaps the most important lesson from Max's incredible journey is what it reveals about the depth of emotional bonds between humans and dogs, and about capabilities that exist within animals that science is only beginning to understand. Max's journey wasn't just physical survival, Dr. Rodriguez reflects. It was emotional perseverance driven by attachment strong enough to sustain him through more than a year of hardship. That tells us something profound about the emotional lives of dogs and about the bonds they form with their humans. The dog who walked 2,000 miles to find his owner proved that love can create motivation powerful enough to achieve what seems impossible, that animals possess cognitive and emotional capabilities far beyond what we typically recognize, and that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements come not from superior abilities but from refusing to give up on those we love. Max's legacy extends beyond his individual story, to include greater recognition of canine intelligence, deeper appreciation for human-animal bonds, and inspiration for anyone facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles. His journey reminds us that determination driven by love can overcome challenges that logic says should be impossible, and that sometimes the most profound lessons about perseverance come not from human achievement, but from the loyalty of a dog who refused to accept that he couldn't find his way home.